As the final step before the divorce, I agreed to this meeting, maybe just to get it over with. My wife, her new partner, who also used to be my friend, and I sat down together. He was the CFO of my company and had agreed to be there. I was completely broken, a defeated man. I had nothing left to give. I was devastated by the way they treated me, by the fact that he had moved into my home, slept in my bed with my wife. Everything that once mattered to me was gone, and they knew they had won. The divorce agreement was already signed. Once the judge gave the final approval, it would be official. I would keep full ownership of my former company, at least in name. But under Maryland law, 9% of the company was hers by right. And John, her new lover, was granted 10%. Together, they now controlled 55% of the shares. They had full authority to make decisions, change policies, take actions, whatever they wanted. I agreed to give Maryland the remaining 45% of my shares. It was all laid out in the divorce papers, with a few conditions in return, which I'll mention later. We were scheduled to meet at 2 p.m. at my lawyer's office. I was just waiting for the court's confirmation that all necessary documents were signed. Other than that, I only asked for full ownership of a few minor legal entities, one of the few conditions I insisted on. And I made sure we included a final clause in the contract. After the divorce was finalized, Maryland would forfeit any future right to request changes or seek further compensation. I wanted this nightmare to be over. I never wanted to step into a courtroom again. The room was crowded. Alongside Marilyn and John sat her lawyer, a corporate attorney, and his assistant. On my side, it was just me, my lawyer, and his assistant. We had once all been close, friends, even. Now we sat in silence, 8 people in total, barely making eye contact. The lawyers whispered back and forth for about 10 minutes. And then it was done. 24 years of work. My blood, sweat, and sacrifice. Everything I had built was now theirs, my ex-wife and the man I once called a friend. The company's lawyer was the first to speak. He officially announced the changes in ownership and the settlement of all corporate affairs. He had known me for many years and was clearly uncomfortable, disgusted, even, by what they had done. But he had to represent the new leadership. I had asked him to stay on, for the sake of the employees and the divorce settlement. Then he handed some papers to Robert Williams and cleared his throat. "It's my duty to inform you," he said formally, "that effective immediately, you are released from all responsibilities and your position as president and CEO of Wilshire Industries. You'll be allowed to collect your personal belongings under supervision." "Thank you, Peter," I replied calmly. "I understand this isn't easy for you. We were friends for many years. But my office is already cleaned out. I've taken everything I need. We can discuss the severance agreement after this," he said. Peter looked through my termination documents and raised his eyebrows. There was no mention of severance pay. So they'd even taken that from me. "We can talk about that later," he offered again. "I doubt it," I interrupted. "But I want everything done properly. I only have an hour, so I'd like to use it wisely." With a touch of sarcasm, I added, "It's nice to know you can spare an hour for 25 years of marriage, hard work, and loyalty." Then I turned to Marilyn. "Marilyn, let me ask you something. Wasn't I a good husband? A good father? Didn't I provide everything you ever asked for, to the best of my ability?" For a brief moment, she looked almost embarrassed. Then she shrugged. "Bob, it's simple," she said. "It's about the money. You know the offer we got was amazing, $43 million. John would make $4 million, and we'd walk away with almost 40. We could leave this boring town, move to France, or wherever we wanted. You seem happy to rot here, but this place? It's like a swamp covered in algae." She let out a cold laugh. "And what if we sell the company? Then it's ours." I turned their attention back to something they clearly didn't care about, the employees. They were just as important to this company's success as we ever were. Maybe even more. Many of them worked long hours, often unpaid overtime, and made the company what it is today, the same success you're now cashing in on. I looked at Marilyn. "Did you know the buyers plan to shut down the factory? All they want are the patents. They're going to move production abroad. These people, your neighbors, your former classmates, the ones you saw at local events, school functions, church fundraisers, They'll all lose their jobs. Our daughters grew up with their children, I said. You know exactly what's going to happen. These families will struggle. This town will lose the very jobs it depends on. But Marilyn just sneered. Why should I care about these backwoods people, she said. All they care about is football, hunting, and their miserable, boring little lives. I deserve more than this. I'm not going to rot here forever. She scoffed. Do you really think I want to spend the rest of my life baking cakes for church bazaars or collecting money for the PDA? Her face twisted like she'd just tasted something sour. And what about our daughters? I asked. How do you think they'll feel coming back here one day, only to find out their own mother put their friends' families out of work, that their classmates had to fight to put food on the table? She waved it off. They'll be fine. And why would they ever come back here? They'll get the chance to see the real world. They'll find out soon enough that you're not the person they think you are, I said. But that doesn't matter to you, does it? What I really want to know is, why did you do this to me? Why betray me like this? Why go behind my back and start an affair with John? Was this your plan all along? To rob me of everything and leave me with nothing? I looked at John. You took 10% of my company. With that, plus the 45% you got in the divorce, you've got control. Now you're selling it off, bit by bit. And the affair? Was that just part of the plan too? Marilyn shrugged. It's done. Once the affair was out in the open, you couldn't undo it. And we both knew your old-fashioned sense of loyalty, duty, and honor wouldn't let you forgive me. As soon as you found out about John, she continued, you were finished. He hasn't made much money aside from his salary. Everything he earned, he reinvested. But once we sell the company, he'll walk away with millions. John shares my dream of leaving this place behind, she said. John, sitting next to her, nodded smugly. What none of you expected, I said, was that I'd fight back. You thought I'd quietly hand over my shares without question. But I'm trading my stake in the company, my 45%, for something else. Pensions and severance packages for the employees. If you close the factory, they'll lose their livelihoods. At least they should walk away with something. Marilyn frowned. I had said the one thing she didn't want to hear, the truth. She had sold herself for money. There was no other way to put it. And after seeing her in bed with John, I had no doubt they'd orchestrated this from the beginning. You're right, I said. My so-called narrow-minded morals won't let me forget or forgive what you did. If I'd known what you were planning, I never would have filed for divorce. I would have fought it from the start. This wasn't just your idea, was it? I asked. It was John's too. Or maybe he manipulated you, and you went along with it. She crossed her arms. It was a mutual decision. A calculated one. Maybe John and I aren't in love, but we share the same vision. The same goals. Marilyn was growing irritated now. Bob, this meeting is only happening because of the divorce settlement. This conversation is pointless. Nothing we say now will change anything. Like it or not, this is just business. It's not personal. Fine, I said. Let's talk business. I assume John will take over management of Wilshire. She nodded firmly. John will be president. He'll oversee the sale. I'll act as CEO, and Peter, she pointed to the lawyer, will remain as our chief legal advisor. Got it, I said. Then let's move on to my severance package. I placed some papers on the table and slid them across. According to the newly registered divorce decree, I explained, any employee who, at the time of the ruling, today, 2:10 p.m., is not a shareholder of Wilshire and is terminated within the next 3 years, will be entitled to a severance payment equal to 1 year's salary, based on their earnings at the time of signing. The severance payments, according to the corporate agreement, would follow the applicable wage scales. Beyond that, I explained, the entire amount needed to cover 100% of the severance pay for every employee had already been placed into a separate trust account. I had all the official documents to prove it. Even in the event of the company's bankruptcy, this account would remain untouched. There was one more condition. If the company were sold, and the new owners later decided to shut it down, the severance clause would still apply. Peter, I said, turning to our lawyer, can you confirm that everything I just said matches the terms in the documents? These are exactly the terms of the property transfer to Marilyn Williams, he said, referring to the divorce agreement. He nodded and continued. A trust account has been created, Peter explained, and is being managed by an independent legal entity. To fund it, Wilser had to take out a significant loan. He paused briefly and looked at me, which, by the way, you didn't agree with. Correct, I said. But despite your objections, he added, Ms. Williams' legal team secured court approval for it. Peter looked me in the eye. You've completely stepped away from all involvement in this matter. You've ensured there's no suspicion of interference, bias, or misconduct. Everything was done above board. So, I continued, under the agreement, I'm entitled to receive my full annual salary, which must be paid out immediately following the termination of my position after the divorce was finalized. I held up the relevant documents and my most recent payslips. As the company's former president and CEO, my annual salary was $400,000. I was calm, professional, and firm. I'm formally requesting this amount be transferred to me from the trust account. I turned to Marilyn and John one last time. You both understand, as the new owners, that you're legally obligated to maintain this trust account. If anything is missing from it, you'll have to restore those funds before the company can be sold. At that point, my lawyer pushed several papers across the table toward me. I took a moment to review them, then handed copies to Peter, John, and Marilyn. These documents show, I said, that I am the president and sole owner of the Williams Trust Corporation. That corporation owns all licenses and manufacturing rights for every product made by Wilser. All patent rights belong to the Williams Trust and are currently only licensed to Wilser Industries. This license, I continued, expires at the end of this month. I looked around the room, letting the weight of my words sink in before I turned back to the papers. This decision is fully in line with the existing production contract. And under that contract, the Williams Trust Corporation retains exclusive manufacturing rights. Furthermore, as of the termination date, Wilser is obligated to sell all products that were already produced, but they will no longer be authorized to manufacture new ones. I leaned back and let the others absorb what I had just told them. A few minutes passed in silence. Then Peter chuckled quietly. John sat frozen, mouth slightly open, completely stunned. Marilyn's lawyers exchanged panicked glances. I don't understand, Marilyn finally said, clearly shaken. Can someone explain to me what just happened? Peter was the one to respond. I swear there was a glint of amusement in his eyes. As the documents show, Wilser does not own any of the actual production patents. Each one is registered under a separate company, owned entirely by your ex-husband. And these were awarded to him under the terms of your divorce agreement. Peter turned toward me. According to the contract, Mr. Williams leased the patents, some of them dating back over 20 years, for just $100 per month. The total income from this licensing arrangement never exceeded $100,000 a year. He paused, looking me over as if seeing me in a new light. This must have been set up when Bob founded the company, even before I joined as legal counsel. That's right, I confirmed. My father arranged it when we first started to make sure the patents would be protected, even if the company ever went bankrupt. Peter nodded again. As I said, Bob and I weren't just colleagues. We were friends. Marilyn's face was red with anger. She slammed her palm on the table, nearly scattering the documents. What does it even matter, she snapped, if Bob owns some little company that makes barely any money? Her voice was rising, her frustration mounting. We wanted to sell the company, and we never actually planned to shut the company down. John stammered, finally speaking. He turned toward Marilyn, his friend-turned-lover. But it doesn't matter now, he said bitterly. We're screwed either way. The patents were the only thing the buyers were interested in, and Bob always owned them. He shot me a hateful look. All we have now is an empty shell of a company, no assets, millions in debt. We took out massive loans just to fund that trust account, and we can't even create anything new anymore. We can't sell. We can't recover our losses. And worst of all, we're legally required to pay every employee a full year's salary by the end of the month. He threw his hands up. And the money for that, it's locked away in the trust account. We can't touch a single cent of it. Then he slammed his fist on the table. We really screwed this up. But suddenly, Something shifted in his face, like a twisted sort of peace washed over him. It was unnerving. In about a month, we'll be completely bankrupt, he said, almost calmly. At least I'll still get my full annual salary out of this disaster. But you, my dear. He looked at Marilyn with a smirk. I doubt you'll be left with anything. Marilyn slumped in her chair, her face drained of color. The reality of what she'd done was finally sinking in. Peter, our lawyer, added the final blow. Actually, John, he said, turning to him with a neutral tone, you're not entitled to a severance payment either. To avoid any conflict of interest, the contract excludes payouts to anyone who was a partner at the time of the company's founding. Over the next 6 months, I auctioned off all of Wilser's remaining assets. Then, I started fresh. I reopened operations under a new name and hired back every employee who wanted to return. Many went on to start their own businesses, some started families. After receiving their full annual salary, most moved on to new opportunities. For the rest, I offered a fully paid 6-month sabbatical, followed by another 6 months of double pay. As for Marilyn and John, they were left with nothing. Eventually, Marilyn did get what she wanted. She left our small town, but not in the way she had hoped. She couldn't show her face in public anymore without being followed by whispers and scorn. Everyone knew how she had ruined lives, how she had tried to destroy an entire community for money. Former friends turned their backs on her. Neighbors refused to speak to her. She faced open hostility. And though I did more for my daughters than for her, I still helped Marilyn quietly. I set aside a small sum so she could afford an apartment. But I never spoke to her again, never saw her again. The only thing I've heard is that she now works part-time at a cafe, serving coffee during the day instead of attending charity events or school board meetings. My 2 daughters now work with me in the company. They told me they love the small-town life. The quiet, the community, it means something to them. And me? I met someone new. A woman who truly appreciates the simplicity of this life. We take things slowly, but I have to admit, I'm curious to see where this connection will take us.